My name is Elijah Monroe. I'm an architect. I build things for a living. Structures meant to last, foundations meant to hold. I say that because you need to understand what kind of man I am before you understand what kind of damage this story left behind. I don't walk away from things easily. I was raised to fix what's broken, reinforce what's weak, and stand inside what I've built even when the walls are shaking. So when I tell you what my wife said to me on a Sunday morning over waffles and orange juice, I need you to understand that the man sitting at that kitchen island had already survived losing his father at 11 years old, had already learned to swallow grief like it was water, had already spent his entire life making sure the things he loved were built to last. I need you to understand all of that, so you understand exactly how hard she had to swing to crack me. She came downstairs in her silk robe, hair wrapped, face lotioned, beautiful the way she always was, the kind of beautiful that made you forget to count what it was costing you. I was at the kitchen island with my blueprints rolled open and my coffee going cold and a pen behind my ear. Normal Sunday. Atlanta rain tapping against the windows, bacon grease smell drifting from the stove, the kind of morning my father used to call a good reason to stay inside. She poured her orange juice, sat across from me, didn't clear her throat, didn't say we need to talk, didn't give me a single thing to brace against. She just said it. I've been thinking. I think we should open the marriage. I didn't move. The pen stayed behind my ear. My coffee stayed on the counter. I found her face and I kept my eyes there because some part of me, the part that builds things, the part that measures twice before it cuts, needed to make sure I had heard what I heard. What? An open marriage, Eli. I just feel like we've gotten so routine. And I don't want to resent you. I love you. That's exactly why I'm bringing this up. She said it the way you'd propose switching streaming services. Calm. Decided. Like she'd already had the argument with herself and won. I looked at her for 10 full seconds. Then I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, set it down, and said, "Pass the syrup." She blinked. "Elijah." "The syrup, Camille. Please." She slid it across the counter. I poured it on my waffles, folded my blueprints, picked up my plate, and walked to the living room. I turned on the game, volume low, like nothing had happened. But my hands were shaking, and somewhere in the back of my mind, quiet as a crack in a load-bearing wall, one thought was already forming. She must think I'm stupid. 2 weeks later, I agreed to it. I want you to sit with that for a second before I explain, because I know how it sounds. I know what you're thinking. But you have to understand something about the way Camille argued. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She framed everything as an act of love, wrapped the whole thing in concern for me, for us, for the health of what we were building together. She said things like, "I don't want to drift from you," and this is me being honest instead of sneaking around, and every single sentence was engineered to make refusal feel like the unreasonable position. She gave me 2 weeks of distance, 2 weeks of her being the perfect wife, cooking, present, warm, laughing at my jokes the way she used to when we were 27 and newly in love, and then she sat me down at the dining room table and laid out terms like a woman who had already decided the answer and was only waiting for the paperwork. No one from our social circle. No overnight stays. No emotional attachment. I sat across from her and watched her write the rules with a pen I bought her for her birthday. I thought about my father. I thought about how he drove to get a Christmas tree and never came back. I thought about what it felt like to lose someone you loved without any warning and without any choice. At least this way, I told myself, I still had a say. At least this way, she was still hey. I signed off on it with a nod. No pen, just a nod. The first night she went out, I was in the living room pretending to read. I heard the bathroom fan. I heard Beyoncé drifting down the stairs. She always played Beyoncé when she was getting ready for something that mattered. I heard heels on hardwood, and each step landed somewhere in the center of my chest. She came downstairs in a navy dress, hair out, and she was wearing the perfume I'd bought her for our 3rd anniversary, the one we'd picked together at a boutique on the Beltline, the one she said smelled like the version of herself she wanted to be. She was wearing our perfume on her way out to another man's evening. "I won't be late," she said. "Okay," I said. She paused at the door. I think she was waiting for me to say something else. I didn't. The door closed. I sat in the silence for 3 minutes. Then I called my mother. I didn't say anything when she picked up. She didn't ask me anything either. She just set the phone down near her television so I could hear the sound of a game show in the background. The sound of something ordinary, something that wasn't falling apart. I fell asleep on the couch at 1 a.m. with the phone still in my hand. Camille came home at 1:47. I felt her step carefully over my legs on her way to the bedroom. She didn't wake me. She didn't check on me. She stepped over me like I was furniture she was used to navigating around. And that, more than the dress, more than the perfume, more than the navy and the heels and the Beyoncé, that was the moment something in me went quiet in a way I didn't yet have a name for. I found out later that the man she was seeing had a silver Charger. I found out later it was parked on our street. I found out later it was Dre. But that night, I just lay on the couch and listened to the city and tried to remember the last time my wife had looked at me the way she looked when she walked out that door. 6 weeks into the open marriage, I was doing my best impression of a man who was fine. Gym, work, blueprints. I was pouring myself into a massive housing development downtown, low-income units, the kind of project my father would have driven past slowly and nodded at. Keeping busy was the only architecture that made sense anymore. Then one evening Camille came home and kissed me on the cheek before heading upstairs, and I smelled it. Creed Aventus. I know that cologne the way I know my own reflection. I stood in the mall with Dre 18 months ago, watched him test 3 bottles before I pointed to that one and said, "That one's you, bro. That's the one." He bought it on the spot. I stood at the kitchen sink and told myself it was a popular fragrance. I told myself a lot of things in those weeks. I was becoming fluent in the language of self-deception. I went upstairs, asked Camille about her evening, light, casual, the way you ask about weather. She described the man as tall and low-key. So they went to a new restaurant in Midtown. Said he was interesting. I nodded. Went to brush my teeth. Stayed at myself in the mirror for a long time. I almost called Dre. Something in my chest stopped me. Not suspicion yet, just a pressure I didn't have words for. What I didn't know then was that Dre was in his apartment at that same moment, staring at 5 missed calls from Camille, putting his phone in a drawer like a man hiding evidence he hadn't been charged for yet. What I didn't know was that Tariq had already seen the silver Charger on my street at 2 a.m. What I didn't know could have filled the blueprints of every building I'd ever designed. I rinsed my mouth, went to bed, slept beside my wife. The cologne stayed in my nose all night. It was Tariq who almost told me first. He called at midnight on a Thursday while I was on the balcony with a glass of Hennessy, watching the Atlanta skyline do what it always does, glow like it has no idea anything is wrong down below. "Eli, you good?" "I'm breathing." "What's up?" There was a pause. The kind of pause that has weight to it. "I need to tell you something about Dre." Then from behind him, a crash. His youngest son screaming. His wife's voice cutting through everything like a fire alarm. "Tariq, Junior fell." "Hold on. Babe, I'm coming." "Eli, I gotta." Line dead. I stayed at my phone. Called back. Voicemail. Texted. "You good? What were you about to say?" Nothing for 2 hours. At 2 a.m. he texted, "Family emergency. Everything fine. Talk tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. I waited for that conversation like a man waiting for a doctor's results he already knew weren't good. Every time Tariq's name lit up my phone that week, my stomach tightened. But he never brought it back up. He'd pulled himself back from the edge of telling me and convinced himself, the way good people sometimes do, that silence was the kinder option. It wasn't. I sat on that balcony for another hour after his text, Hennessy going warm in my hand, thinking about the specific cruelty of almost knowing something. The skyline kept glowing. I went back inside and lay down next to Camille and listened to her breathe in the dark. She sounded so peaceful. I didn't sleep at all. I was supposed to be in Charlotte until Friday. The job site had a pipe crisis on Wednesday afternoon and the crew handled it by 3 p.m., which meant I caught an early flight home without texting anyone. I just wanted my own bed. I wanted to walk into my house and feel like something in my life still belonged to me. I took an Uber from the airport. 4:17 p.m. unlocked the front door, dropped my bag in the hallway, loosened my tie. I heard Camille laughing from the kitchen. Not a polite laugh. Not a company laugh. The deep, loose, completely comfortable laugh she hadn't aimed in my direction in months. The laugh I fell in love with at 27 at a rooftop party in Midtown. I walked around the corner. She had her back to me, phone to her ear, one hand on the window frame, completely inside whatever conversation she was having. "Stop. You're so stupid." She turned around. The laugh died. Completely. Instantly. Not slowed. Died. Like a switch. Her face rearranged itself in under a second into something that resembled happiness to see me. "Eli, I didn't know you were coming back early." She pulled the phone from her ear and ended the call. No goodbye to whoever was on the line. Just ended. Who was that? Jasmine. I nodded. Went upstairs. Sat on the edge of the bed and stayed at the carpet like it owed me an explanation. 20 minutes later, Camille's phone lit up on the nightstand. She was in the shower. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The name on the screen read Dre. The preview text read, "That was close. You okay?" I stood up from the bed slowly, walked to the window, looked out at the city. "Okay," I said to no one. "Okay." My hands weren't shaking this time. I called my mother the next morning. One word was all it took. She heard Mama and went completely quiet because Elijah Monroe has known my voice since before I knew my own name. She didn't ask what happened. She just said, "Talk to me, Elijah." So I talked. I lined everything up the way I line up structural calculations. The cologne, the phone call, the text preview, Tariq's almost confession, the laugh that died the moment she saw my face. I didn't accuse out loud. I just laid the evidence in a row and let it speak. When I finished, the line was silent for a long moment. Then my mother said 6 words. "Baby, I saw this coming." The silence that followed was the largest silence I have ever sat inside. She told me about the wedding. She told me she'd watched Camille's eyes find Dre across the reception hall before they found me. She said she'd tucked it away and prayed over it because I was happy and she didn't want to be the person who planted doubt inside my happiness. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I didn't say something." I couldn't speak. "Come home," she said. "I can't yet, Mama." "Then do what you need to do. But you hear me. Every decision you make from here, I am in your corner. Every single step." I hung up, opened my phone, found Dre's contact. I typed, "Yo, come through tonight. Got Hennessy. Need my brother." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Say less. I'm there." I set the phone face down on the counter and looked out the window at the city Camille and I had built our life inside of. "All right, Dre," I said quietly. "Let's see who you are." He arrived at 7 p.m. with that same easy smile. 22 years of easy smiles. We poured drinks, talked basketball, talked about the downtown project. He laughed at the right moments, asked the right questions, sat on my couch like a man with a clean conscience, and I watched every single second of it. I watched how he never asked about Camille unprompted. Watched how his phone stayed face down all night. Watched how something behind his eyes went carefully still whenever her name drifted into the conversation. Around 9 p.m. I said it casually, no edge at all. "Camille's been seeing someone." He took a sip. "Oh yeah, how you feeling about that?" "Not who. Not seriously. Just, how you feeling about that?" Like a man who already knew the answer to the question he wasn't asking. "I feel like something's off about it," I said. "You know anything about that, bro?" He met my eyes, held them steady. "Nah, I don't know nothing about your wife's situation." He said it clean, calm, the way you say something you've rehearsed without meaning to. I nodded. "All right." We watched the rest of the game. He left at 10:30. We dapped up at the door like 22 years of normal. The moment it closed, I leaned my back against it and closed my eyes. My phone rang. "Tariq, Eli, I saw his car, Dre's car, outside your house, at 2 a.m. 3 weeks ago. I should have called you the same night. I'm sorry, man. I am so sorry." I stood against the door for a long time. "I know, Tariq," I finally said. I just needed somebody to say it out loud. It was a Saturday when I did it. Camille woke up beside me, kissed my forehead, and drove to brunch with her mother. I lay still until I heard her car turn off the block. Then I got up. I moved through that house the way I moved through a job site. Methodical. No wasted motion. I packed 2 rolling suitcases, clothes, toiletries, her grandmother's jewelry box, the framed photos that mattered to her. I didn't throw anything. I didn't break anything. I was not that man, and I refused to become him. A locksmith I'd called the night before arrived in 40 minutes. I carried both suitcases to the front porch, set them down neatly, side by side, placed her spare car keys in a small bowl on top of the larger bag like I was leaving out something she'd forgotten. I went back inside. The new locks clicked into place. I sat at the kitchen island, always the same island, and texted Camille, "Your bags are on the porch. I'd appreciate it if you came for them before it gets dark." Then I texted Dre, "Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't pull up. We're done." I set the phone on the counter. She called 9 times in 6 minutes. I let it ring all 9 times. Then a text I wasn't expecting lit up my screen. Not Camille. Not Dre. Naomi Pierce. "Elijah, there's something on Camille's phone you need to hear." A voicemail. She never deleted it. "I'll send it to you if you want it." I stayed at it. Then I typed back, "Send it." I was driving when it came through. I'd passed our street. Camille was already on the porch beside her suitcases, phone to her ear, and I didn't stop. I kept driving until I found a side street and pulled over. I pressed play. Naomi's voice came through the speaker clear and calm. The voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose and nothing left to hide. "You went into that man's house. You sat at his table. You smiled in my face. And then you went home and slept next to Elijah. The earring is in my pocket. I know everything. And one day, so will he." I sat with it. I didn't cry. I did something harder than crying. I went back through every moment of the last 4 months and watched them all again with the lights fully on. Every laugh that died too fast. Every cologne that shouldn't have been there. Every text deleted before I could read it. Every morning she stepped over me on the couch like I was something in her way. I picked up my phone and called Simone. Hey, you okay?" "No, but I think I'm going to be." "You need to talk." "Not tonight." I just needed to hear a voice that wasn't lying to me. A beat of silence. Then, "I'm here. Take your time." I drove to my mother's house. When Cleo opened the door and saw my face, she pulled me inside without a single word. Through the living room window, headlights turned onto her street. Camille had followed me. Cleo stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind her before Camille could say anything that was meant for me. Camille looked like she hadn't slept. The composure was gone. The silk robe certainty, the orange juice calm, all of it stripped back to something raw and unfamiliar on her face. "Cleo, I just need to talk to Elijah. I made a terrible mistake and I—" "Camille." My mother's voice was not raised. It was the opposite, that quiet that requires your full attention. "I'm going to speak to you as a woman who buried a husband, raised a son alone, and sat at your wedding table and prayed for you both." Camille went still. "You asked my son to share you with the world, with his best friend. And when you got what you wanted, you expected him to still be standing there holding the door open. That's not love, baby. That is entitlement wearing love's clothing." I know that now. The knowing now doesn't unring the bell. Cleo took one slow breath. "I'm not telling you he'll never forgive you. That's his decision to make. But you don't come to my house at night expecting that forgiveness to be waiting on the porch with your luggage." She opened the door behind her. "I'll let him know you came by." The door closed. I'd heard every word through the living room window. I was sitting on the couch with my elbows on my knees, staring at the floor, when my mother sat down beside me and put her hand on my back. "What do I do, Mama?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You already know, baby. You've known for a while now." Over the next 2 weeks, Camille sent 11 voice memos. I know the exact number because I counted them the morning after. They arrived between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., spaced out like a woman running out of arguments, but not out of desperation. She talked about her mother's voice living inside her head her whole life. She talked about Yvette telling her that stability was just another word for stuck, and how she'd carried that like a compass that only pointed toward destruction. She cried on the recordings. Real crying, not the performative kind. She said Dre's name out loud and called it exactly what it was. A betrayal she had no justification for and no way to undo. On the 10th memo, she apologized to Naomi. On the 11th, she apologized to me. 17 minutes of apology. She talked about the boy she'd married, the architect who held his coffee with both hands and asked the receptionist about her sick mother every Monday morning, the man who packed her grandmother's jewelry box before her clothes when he put her bags on the porch. And she said, voice completely broken by then, "That's who you are, Elijah." And I boned it down. I listened to all 11. In the morning I made coffee, sat at the kitchen island of my rental unit, my drafting table in the corner, my father's hand level on the windowsill where I could always see it. I opened my contacts, found her name. I blocked it, not in anger, not in bitterness, with the steady hands of a man who had finally accepted that some structures, no matter how much love went into them, could not be saved, only cleared, so something true could be built on honest ground. I texted Simone, "You free this weekend?" She replied in under a minute, "I've been free." 8 months later, I was on the South Atlanta job site, the low-income housing development, the one my father would have nodded at slowly from his truck window. I was walking the frame with blueprints in one hand and coffee in the other when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. Dre, hard hat in his hand, not on his head, like he didn't feel he'd earned the right to wear it here. He looked like a man who hadn't slept cleanly since the last time I'd seen him. Smaller somehow, the easy smile gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like the face he wore at my father's funeral when he was 16 and didn't know what to do with someone else's grief. The crew drifted to the far end of the site without being asked. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he started. "I'm not here to explain. He stopped. Tried again. 22 years. I threw 22 years away because I was selfish and weak, and I told myself a lie until I believed it. That's on me. All of it." His voice broke. "I just needed you to know that I know what I did. And I know who I lost." I looked at him for a long time. Behind me, the bones of a new building rose against the Atlanta sky. Steel and concrete and honest labor. Something built to last for people who needed something solid beneath their feet. "I forgive you, Dre." Relief moved across his face. Then devastation. Then something quieter. "But I can't be your brother anymore. Some things you forgive because you're free, not because you're back." I turned around and went back to my blueprints. He stood there a moment longer. Then he put his hard hat on slowly and walked off the site. 6 weeks after that, Simone was at my stove in my Howard University hoodie making eggs on a Sunday morning, easy and present and completely herself. I walked in, picked up my father's hand level from the windowsill, and turned it in the light until the bubbles settled perfectly, cleanly, in the center. Level. Balanced. True. I set it back down. And for the first time in longer than I could measure, everything I'd built felt like it was going to hold.